We've been gearing up for Aligned 17, which is a virtual conference dedicated to sales and marketing alignment. It's happening May 22nd through the 26th, and we wanted to do something special for B2B Growth listeners. Leading up to the event, we'll be giving you early access to some of the Aligned 17 sessions. Today's episode is exactly that. So if you like today's interview, head over to aligned17.com and sign up to access every session of the event. We've got an incredible lineup of speakers, including Gary Vaynerchuk, Jill Konrath, Tony Hughes, Tucker Max, and Trish Bertuzzi, along with dozens of other B2B sales and marketing experts. So go to aligned17.com and sign up today. You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to Aligned 17. My name is Jonathan Green, and today it is my distinct pleasure to get to talk to my co-host of the B2B Growth Show, Mr. James Carberry. James, how you doing today?
I'm wonderful, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Now, of course, as I just mentioned, you and I are co-hosts of the B2B Growth Show, so you are oftentimes on the other side of the podcast interview equation. So today I think it's great that we get to put you in the hot seat as we talk about something that's very near and dear to us, which is how a podcast drives sales and marketing alignment. And I think immediately as a lot of people hear that, how it drives sales and marketing alignment, they may think to themselves, I kind of understand the marketing side. You get an audience and, a podcast is a great way to reach your audience and market your service, your products, your industry, what it is you're trying to talk about. Where is sales? What's the sales side of this? And so maybe tell us a little about, what is the purpose of a podcast?
Yeah, I think the idea of a podcast bringing sales and marketing alignment is foreign because most B2B marketers are thinking about podcasting wrong. If I'm honest, they're looking at it, like you just said, from the perspective of trying to grow an audience and thinking that the only benefit to a podcast is in the reach that the podcast has from an audience perspective. When in reality, our thesis at Sweetfish, what we've really bought into and the way we execute it for clients and the way we do it for ourselves with the B2B Growth Show that you and I host is that your audience actually doesn't matter. That will come as you put out more and more content, but it actually takes a while to grow an audience with a podcast. But there's actually immediate return on your investment in podcasting in the relationships that you can build with the guests that you bring onto your show. And so many, you and I were even talking about it this morning, Jonathan, like most marketers can't see that because they are only focused on the volume game. We want to reach tons of people with whatever our message is, whatever our content is. But if you're in the B2B space and the lifetime value of your product or service is, significant, $25,000 or higher, which most of the people watching this, that's the case for their product or service. You don't need volume. You need one decision maker. You need a relationship, a genuine relationship with one decision maker to really move the needle. And so if you brand your podcast so that you can feature those decision makers as guests on your show, well, now you're positioned, you have a platform that can allow you to connect with any decision maker you want to connect with by simply asking them to be a guest on your show, as opposed to shoving your product or service down their throat and trying to sell it to them with a cold email or a cold call. Instead, you're going and saying, hey, I want to feature you on the CLO show or the whatever, in our case, the B2B Growth Show, where we're going after VPs of marketing and CMOs. And so instead of going to them and saying, hey, we should produce a podcast for you, which is what we do, we go to them and say, hey, do you want to be on our podcast, the B2B Growth Show? We'd love to feature you as a guest. Well, we get, 65% positive reply rates because we're not selling them. We're partnering with them to create content. And so that's the overall kind of thesis of why I think it's confusing for people to think, okay, sales and marketing alignment, like how does that make sense with a podcast? What makes sense if you're doing your podcast right? And if you're a B2B brand, you shouldn't be focused on audience growth. You should be focused on having a show that puts you in a position to create one-to-one relationships with your ideal clients as guests on your show.
Yeah, I love to every time I hear you say it or every time I say it, because this is a common theme, especially in our world, is when you tell someone, as you just said, your audience size doesn't matter. You know, it almost sounds like heresy to someone who is interested in doing a podcast. Like, I'm going to have this great audience. I'm going to reach so many people. And you say to them, audience size doesn't matter. So, what? You know? That immediate pushback. And you're so right that there's this huge benefit on the front end before you've even grown an audience of one. Okay, so that's perfect. So now that people watching, people listening understand what is a huge benefit, a main benefit of podcasting, how does this podcast actually drive alignment?
That's a great question. And so the way it drives alignment is pretty simple. So marketing typically owns the production of the podcast. And so this is where we come in as a service and serve our clients. We serve the marketing team because the editing of the audio, the figuring out the topics, all of the things that go into creating a podcast typically fall on the shoulders of a marketing department. But where the alignment piece comes in is, who are you getting as guests on your show? And that is something that sales actually needs to determine. So as opposed to, marketing determining who the guests should be, if you get sales to say, hey, these are the accounts that we're going after, these are the decision makers that we've been trying to get in touch with or that we want to get in touch with, sales then informs marketing to say, hey, I want Bob from Intuit I want an in with him. And so marketing says, okay, we'll put Bob on the lineup for him to be a guest on our podcast. So we're now going to reach out to Bob, say, hey, Bob, we want to talk to you about, whatever the topic is on our show that is centric to Bob's role. And Bob then comes on the show, now has a relationship with your brand because you've partnered with him to create content. And on the back end of that SDR or your AE or Bob's counterpart in, the equivalent of Bob's role in your own organization reaches out to Bob and says, hey, I listened to the episode, you on our podcast, would love to chat further with you, and you nurture the relationship from that perspective. So that's where the alignment comes in. The bulk of the nuts and bolts of the podcast are managed by marketing, but the guest lineup is defined by sales, because that's where your ROI is in the guests. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes perfect sense to me. Of course, I also am very into this world, so hopefully that's not an incredibly biased answer.
So Johnny, you're obviously, we're in this together. Like, Sweetfish is our baby. Like, it's, we're business partners in this thing. So you're on sales calls, every day. I'm doing a lot of sales calls and in-person meetings, talking with folks about this. Like, to kind of turn it back on you, how do you explain it to people in a way that seems to click best for them to understand, like, how this actually drives alignment?
Yeah, how it drives alignment. I think one of the biggest hurdles is, like I said, explaining, how you can actually involve the sales side, because people are so focused on this being a marketing tool because you're producing content, you're enhancing the company's personal brand. These things kind of tend to fall on the marketing side. But I think once I'm able to explain the benefit on the front end of, crafting a show around your ideal customer profile, and if I'm on a call, if I'm talking to someone, whether it's a CEO, whether it's a marketing executive, whether it's a sales executive, and I say, we craft the show around your ideal customer profile. Who is the decision maker that you are trying to connect with? What does that decision maker look like? What's that job title? What's that industry? So if I was to say to you, James, all right, what does your key decision maker look like? The person that chooses whether or not to go with Sweetfish Media, what does that person look like?
It's a CMO or a VP of marketing, typically at a mid-market technology company.
Yeah. So, and then I would say, all right, this is a terrible example, but let's just say we call it the VP of marketing tech show. We are branding the show around that person's interests, around that person's industry, around that person's job title. That's the person that we're going to connect you with, we're going to feature on the show. It's a show by those VPs of marketing for those VPs of marketing. And we're going to connect you with exactly those decision makers to be on the show. And usually at that point, people are a little bit more like, oh, like we're already, we get to talk to them. We already have this outreach. We're already providing value. Like you said, you're already providing value to this person first before you've ever pitched your service or product. That's not where the value comes from. Everyone says, oh, we provide value first because we have such a kick butt product. We have such a kick butt service that's how we're providing value. So no, that's not, that's your service. That's your product. That's not how people are perceiving value. The value is, oh, this person is giving me a platform on which to, talk about the things that I'm interested in, the things that I'm passionate about, the things that I'm struggling with.
Yep.
That's real tangible value and has nothing to do with selling them your product or service. So
this session isn't going to be long because that's the long and short of it. I mean, when you're looking at podcasting as a B2B marketer or a B2B salesperson, you need to be looking at it from the perspective of volume does not matter. It is how can I get my most profitable prospective clients to be a guest on the show? And how can I brand a show around that most profitable buyer? And when you do that correctly and sales informs the specific guests that you get on your show, then that's where the magic happens. That's where the alignment comes in. And that's where you're going to see real return on investment for your podcast. So
yeah, you talk about doing it correctly. You talk about that's where the magic is. I think that part of that doing it correctly and part of that magic is having, even from the beginning, the right mentality of adding value first. This should not be a technique where you are trying to bait and switch. This should not be a technique where you are just pretending to add value. The value should be legitimate. The value should be a real podcast that is actually providing value, that is actually a quality product where you have the right types of guests talking about the important topics, important to them, important to their industry and their job title, it should be a real value. Don't skimp on I'm providing value through this like fake outreach. I can't wait to get to my sales pitch, right? Yeah. It should be, hey, if the sales pitch never happens, or if it turns out to not be something that they're interested in, that would have been icing on the cake. I got to have a great guest. I got to create an incredible new relationship with someone. And who knows where that value comes from down the road. It wouldn't necessarily have to be they didn't buy my service or product. I can sort of check that person off the list and never have to talk to them again.
Yeah, but maybe they become a referral partner down the road. Maybe the piece of content that you create with them ended up attracting the right buyer at another organization. I mean, there's endless ways that you can leverage the piece of content that you're creating with someone. But I love that you made that point, Jonathan, because people will smell it. If they know that you're only doing the interview to ultimately get to your ask, then it's not going to be genuine. You've got to come at it from a place of actually trying to create valuable content with this person. And in doing that, you're going to create a genuine relationship. And out of that genuine relationship, an opportunity to work with them can happen. And so just like in our own story, we're really starting to see this play up with we do a daily podcast, B2B Growth is daily, but in the last 60 days, we've done $95,000 in revenue. 85% of that revenue has come directly from our podcast. Like, this is real. Like, there are real numbers associated with strategically positioning your podcast in a way that positions you to talk to your ideal buyers. And so we obviously, do this daily, so it's magnified. But like one of our clients, like they are trying to reach chief learning officers. And so we branded a show for them, the CLO show. And now all of a sudden, 6 episodes in, they've got $250,000 in their sales pipeline. Like, it's real. And I really want people to understand that, because there's so much value that can come from doing podcasting as a B2B organization correctly.
Yep. Absolutely. James, before we let you go, is there anything that we didn't get a chance to touch on as it concerns, the benefit of podcasting or how podcasting can drive sales and marketing alignment?
I think we covered everything, man. There are a ton of benefits to podcasting outside of sales and marketing alignment. Obviously, the content and giving you rich insight into the brains of your customers. But for this specific episode or session, I want to really hammer home the alignment piece and how if sales is informing the guest lineup and marketing is owning the production of the show, there's going to be something really special that happens there from an alignment perspective. And so I would love to, if anybody has questions, I would love to, we live and breathe this stuff every day. So I'd love to answer any questions. James at sweetfishmedia.com, at James Carberry on Twitter, find me on LinkedIn. Would love to have any and all conversations around this kind of stuff.
Yep. James Carberry, founder of Sweetfish Media, co-host of the B2B Growth Show, recently MC and speaker at Traction Force, and one handsome dude, if I do say so myself.
Thank you, my man. If you're a B2B marketer, we want to feature you on sites like the Huffington Post, Social Media Examiner, and Chief Marketer. Every week, we send out a question related to B2B marketing. We use the responses to those questions to fuel the content we write for really popular websites. So head over to sweetfishmedia.com/questions and sign up today.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.